fair warning, this is essentially just a love letter for Disco Elysium. Disco Elysium is a special game. One of the best written and realised worlds ever explored in the medium, and an unflinching narrative full of complex ideas and observations come together with a depth and maturity that would make a university professor blush. It really is very, very good, and it's remarkable how little the gameplay itself actually has to do in order to achieve this. The power of its writing and characterisation is able to overcome challenges that would be an instant death knell to a lesser work. There is no emphasis on combat, flashy graphics, or even, at least upon initial release, extensive voice acting to ease the player in. It's a game that consists of walking around a static, albeit vivid world, clicking on NPCs and objects to question or read about them, and then passing dice rolls in order to progress the narrative. And yet, it's an incredible experience. And this is a video that's going to dive into why. Right off the bat in Disco Elysium, some of us are going to identify with the protagonist more than others. We awake in a hotel room, hungover out of our skulls, with no memory of where we are, what we're meant to be doing, or even who we are. Now, the amnesiac protagonist is certainly nothing new. In the case of Disco Elysium though, this is not a vehicle designed to give us a blank slate character to work with. Instead, this vehicle is going to take us on a much more interesting journey through which we can discover who our character was and is as we progress through the narrative, and the game is as much about answering these questions as it is anything else. We awake in a crisis moment for our main character, and there is a direct path that can be traced back to figure out what has led us here. A lot of that is pretty ugly, but we'll touch on it later. In terms of immediate objective though, we're as lost as the protagonist is, and it's on us to figure out what's going on and to get into the meat of the story. The tone of the game is apparent as early as a few seconds in, when we might decide to have a discussion with an apparently homicidal necktie and an unfortunate encounter with a mirror, which we must confront who we appear to be from the outside. Like in real life, at least for me, the results aren't pretty. Our first NPC encounter also gives us a strong taste of what is to come. We can be relatively circumspect, respectful, and even, to some extent, apologetic. Or perhaps, more likely, we can allow our thirsty incel gamer credentials to instantly shine through and be an immature, chauvinistic bastard. Portentously, neither option will have the effect you might have hoped for. Disinterest ranging to outright apathetic disdain is about the best you can do at this stage. Things don't get any rosier as we head down to the foyer of the hotel that it turns out we're staying at, whirling in rags. Apparently, we've been nothing short of an absolute bellend during our stay so far, destroying our room, making a racket, upsetting guests, inducing a staff member to quit on the spot, and screaming, "I don't want to be this type of animal anymore!" whilst playing a record loudly and on repeat. So much for a blank slate. Now, I don't want to get too #deep too quickly, but it's worth mentioning at this stage that mental health, substance abuse, and extreme emotional damage are all core parts of the Disco Elysium world and narrative. This is not a happy place, and our protagonist is not a happy person. This will hit harder for some people than others, maybe even as you recognise elements of yourself that you'd rather not confront in the actions of some of the characters. Fundamentally though, Disco Elysium does offer you the chance to be better. If you wanted it to, this could be your character's rock bottom, and you could build yourself back up from this nadir. Of course, you could also very much take things the other way. Disco Elysium was going to give you a Matrix-style immediate choice. It would be the blue pill of insanity and talking ties, or the no pill of sobriety and professionalism. It comes out in the wash that you're some kind of police officer, although exactly what that means seems subject to interpretation. Indeed, you have someone waiting for you downstairs. It turns out to be your partner on a murder case, and whilst they've just got here and thus don't seem to know exactly what's been going on, they're clearly waiting for you to sort yourself out. A man has been killed, You're here to investigate, and your partner has been assigned from a different precinct. Is there a debate raging higher up around the jurisdiction of this particular case? This is an immediate small example of the complex and interesting world that the game takes place in, fleshed out from the mundane level to the sublime. So we have our objective, right? We're here to figure out firstly who the dead man is, secondly who killed him, and lastly, why. Well, yes and no. In and amongst these case-based objectives, we also have some more foundational questions to answer. Who am I? What am I doing investigating this murder? What demons are haunting me? And where the hell did I leave my gun and my badge? A more prosaic question would be how far are you willing to go in order to get information from these mysteries? And not just in a normal video gamey way, but in a way in which you'll end up asking yourself whether or not you're willing to internalise a problematic racial ideology in order to convince someone to let you into an area you want to get into. Like I said, it's a special game. Now, Disco Elysium uncovers answers to all these questions and more during a playthrough, with plenty out there in the world to be found, but time isn't infinite. There are only a set number of days before the case will get to its inevitable end, and this provides you with an impetus to pick up the pace of the investigation and to make sure that you don't miss anything that might be both relevant to the case and time sensitive. You won't always like the answers that you get in Disco Elysium. Our protagonist will experience some real highs and lows during the course of the game itself, but these appear to be nothing in comparison to the life and baggage that he carries around with him from before. In a lot of ways, he's an absolute mess, and he certainly doesn't play it by the book. But by God, he gets things done. For a taste of the level of derangement in store, there are multiple copo types that you can act in accordance with, not to mention a whole host of political and economic philosophies to interact with. Are you a superstar cop? A hero cop? A hobo cop? A boring cop? Somehow, within the game world, these are all legitimate choices. Core to the game is the concept of the thought cabinet. This is one of the most unique concepts in gaming and essentially represents the ideas that our protagonist will come across over the course of the game. Some ideas, like the inexplicable feminist agenda you might choose to get on board with, that's a quote from the game by the way, not my own personal opinion, will have unique game and stat effects. Some will allow you to make breakthroughs in the case. Some will just allow you to engage in deranged conversations with interesting people. It's up to you to consider which areas to introduce to the thought cabinet over a playthrough, so you're influencing not only our characters' actions, but also their core ideologies. Maybe his amnesia is just a device he uses to make sure he always has the right mindset for the job. Oh, and when we talk about the protagonist, man really is a multitude, and the constituent parts are clamouring for our attention. Inner dialogues are given voice with distinct characterisation for each facet of our protagonist. The reptile brain might have a different suggestion to dealing with a situation than the limbic system. Logic might present a different solution to empathy, although not without raw instinct making its presence in Nidblade felt as well. It's utterly insane and absolutely incredible all at the same time. Technically, many of the most interesting conversations and debates in Disco Elysium only involve one person. You. When I started on this script, I was intending to do a warts-and-all examination of the game and its narrative. The truth is though, that I just couldn't do it justice. The best thing that can be said for Disco Elysium is that it's a game you have to play for yourself, because your own inner voice informs so much of what you project onto our protagonist. The narrative is extremely compelling, the world is both ultra-real and utterly fantastical at the same time, the characters are diverse and richly realised, you can channel the energy of a drug-addled crypto-fascist or a dogmatic communist. Ultimately though, you're a police officer and you've got a job to go and do. Thanks for watching. This has been Orpheus Arcadia. I'm Chugs, and yes, for some reason I did write and edit a disco-themed track to kind of go along with the narrative. I'm not really sure why I did that. Hope you enjoyed yourselves. Till the next time.